Hi, this is Misha, and honestly, it's a Friday afternoon, and I just felt like revisiting one of my favorite guns. A few months ago, we did a video on my favorite AK variants, and I selected 6. And I intentionally excluded this gun here. And this is the semi-auto Archer-01, but it is a semi-auto version of the Polish Wz.96A Beryl. And I've always had a thing for this gun. This one's set up in modern configuration with pretty much all the current military parts and features. But this gun has had a very long development history, going through several generations, and I thought we would just kind of revisit it here. And we do have some newer parts to show you in this vid. So let's get started. Stop there. Before we can really talk about the Beryl, we have to visit the Tantal. And I'm not going to get into how the Tantal went into service because that's in another video. But this was the basis for the Beryl. The Tantal was developed actually a long time, beginning in the late 70s through the 80s. And it was really one of what we know today as FB-Radom, which is the Luxnick factory, Factory 11. It was one of their first major projects to develop kind of their own gun. They didn't want to go with the Soviet AK-74, just making a clone, as they had done with the AK Type 3 and AKMS. This is why its development was so protracted. But they finally did adopt their rifle in 5.45x39, just in time for communism to end. So this was adopted in '88. And of course, by '89, communism was on the way out, and by '91, it was gone in Dunskies. So they just adopted a brand new rifle that they'd spent a decade developing in a Soviet cartridge that no one really ever wanted or liked. And as soon as the comm block fell, Poland was already thinking hardcore about joining NATO and the Western world. So as these were still being shipped, because the major production run was from about 89 to 91, 92, they were already not wanting them. They were basically receiving Tantals and then just putting them away. They didn't really want them after all this time. And as soon as they could, they declared them obsolete, and they kind of went back to the AKM, AKMS, and 7.6239 as a de facto standard in the mid-90s. But where this influences the Beryl is really, this is the starting point. 1991, Luxnick introduced a 5.56 version of this gun with black handguards, and also even a carbine version based on the small Onyx, which had a barrel a little under 9 inches. And these were a good step forward, but it was just a rechambering. That's all it was. They went from 5.45 to 5.56. And so the military looked at it and liked the direction they were going, but it was not enough. It wasn't different enough from the Tantal and modern enough to really warrant switching over. And likewise, on the international military market, these guns were not terribly successful. What really we copied from the Tantal, though, where we started off, where it really shows on the Beryl, this has the old wire poker folding stock, copied from East Germany. We have a standard rear trunnion. This is still a 2-rivet. We have a left side fire mode selector, which can do single shot, 3-round burst, or full. Leaving the right side just to be a safety. safe, fire. And of course it doubles as a dust cover for the action, sealing it up pretty well, as most AKs. This one has the rib top cover. Some Tantals also shipped with a slightly thicker smooth. It has an automatic latch here for launching rifle grenades. Standard Bakelite grip. Notice there's no real way to mount an optic, either here or on this side, thanks to the rail. Early on, these had essentially scaled down AKM mags, 30 round, steel, ribbed. Later, they would go to black polymer. Yeah, I'm gonna do that, aren't I? This stuff is really weird to do on camera, guys. The angles and stuff are very peculiar. There we go. This is actually, where did I lay it? This is actually a 5.56 version, but you can't really tell it. The 5.45s looked the same, black polymer. These are coming to use later with the Tantal. Really the biggest thing the Tantal would loan over to the Beryl would be the barrel assembly. The handguards are retained in a very unique method. There's this lever here. You can twist it forward. This is a single piece. It slides forward. Your upper and lower handguards come right off without having to disassemble the gun. And this was to make it much more compatible with grenade launchers. Poland was always big into rifle grenades. This takes standard lower handguards, but the upper is specialized because we don't have the standard gas tube latch back here. Moving forward, we have this 90-degree gas block. We have a 16 1/4 inch, so standard chrome line hammer forged barrel. We have a accessory lug here. We have a lug here for a bipod, which is pretty unique. Here's one. It even stores up in the little pouch here, which is cool. Come on. There we go. 4-cell pouch. They also use 3. It's patterned off the US M16A1 style bipod, dating back to Vietnam and further. That would be carried over and they're pretty neat. Sticks out a bit, but it's a way to carry it. Typical front sight. Because of this whole setup, it's pushed further back. We have this long device. It's kind of like a tri-comp. It works as a grenade launcher, muzzle brake, and flash hider. Interestingly, the barrel extends out further into it to about where the ports begin. So the barrel sticks out here. Now it's 14x1 left-hand thread, which is standard AK, but it's threaded here right at the front sight base, and the barrel sticks out through it. This is to stabilize it for launching rifle grenades, also for accuracy. The more you have wiggle in your muzzle device, the less accuracy you'll probably end up with. I would unscrew it for you guys, but this actually has a shim in it. They put one back here to make it tight, and this one is nice and tight, which is what you want with one of these. I don't feel like unscrewing it. Your standard bayonet lug is here. Takes a standard AKM bayonet, and we have a thin cleaning rod. It's interesting. This is not a standard 74 type rod. It's much thinner. So that was the Tantal, and that was the jumping off point for the Beryl. Just to wrap this guy's story up, the project to produce a new 223 rifle in Poland would begin with military encouragement in the Luxembourg factory, Circle 11, in the mid-90s. So as soon as that was really underway, they declared the Tantal obsolete after receiving about 25,000. And as soon as they could, they surplus them out. some of them never even having seen military service. And these kits started to appear in America in the early 21st century. Some are sold in various civilian markets in Europe, but a majority of the Tantals, at least in kit form, ended up in the US. And this is of course a kit build. There was never an import version semi-auto of the Tantal. The Wz.88. Okay, stop there. So, how do we get from this very conventional looking gun, more or less, to this, a very modern looking AK? Well, once upon a time I actually thought about getting two Archers because they weren't that expensive, under $1,000, and setting one up as an early Wz.96 and one as a late Wz.96. But then they stopped coming in and prices went bananas on Gunbroker, so that didn't happen. So standing in for an early Wz.96 is this guy here. This is the recently released Wbp Fox Rifle. This is an authentic Polish import, manufactured by a commercial company, Wbp, obviously, in Poland, who both sells to the civilian market as well as militaries, and is also sometimes a partner with FB-Radom. And I've set it up with early style furniture and scope mount and so on and so forth. So this will step in and represent the originals. Like I said, in the mid-90s they were working on the Beryl, and in 1996 they had more or less a finished product. It was trialed and then adopted in 1997. And they were ordered, and over time they would slowly be phased in. They would start with the basic Tantal, as I said. Use your imagination here. The original gun would have the Tantal style handguard retainer. It would have the same left side fire mode selector. One change they went to, they took the 16¼ inch barrel and they extended it out to 18.0 inches, like you see on the gun here, because they had the extra space because of the muzzle device change. And they went to a fixed muzzle brake, like this, the same little brake style. It would have had the bipod lug here, so on and so forth. This is actually an FB barrel, but we'll get to that in a bit. These are the early style handguards. They went to black handguards, more of an ergonomic style here with basic ribbing, black upper. There's a clip on the bottom for an accessory, a grenade launcher of sorts. The biggest upgrade was probably the scope mounting system. You notice on that Tantal we didn't really have a way to mount a scope. For the Beryl they went to a cutout on the rear sight base and then a post on the rear trunnion, and this would have the Beryl style scope rail over the top. Now the original rail for the Wz.96 was a proprietary rail, and most guns actually weren't issued with optics early on, but it was an option for later upgrades, which they definitely would avail themselves of. Originally, like I said, the mags would be, where did I set that? Basically the same as Tantal, just upgraded a little bit for 5.56 NATO, specially made for that. They would have metal reinforcement tabs, black polymer. They would use the late style AKM black polymer pistol grip. It's very standard, but it's a little bit larger, therefore a little better ergonomics. And early on, the guns would use the Beryl side folding stock. Boop. It's kind of a Galil style stock, but the latch and everything is very Swiss SG 550-ish. And it uses the same rear trunnion is the Tantal and stuff, so regular stocks will fit this. It has 2 screws, one here, one internal. It also uses a grip reinforcing plate, as did the Tantal, to make it strong. The early guns would have the same manual latch in the back for launching rifle grenades, the Tantal did. And they would have the smooth top cover. They would have the same safety, same selector as the Tantal. All that was kind of carried over. Like I said, I know you have to kind of use your imagination with this gun because it's not completely right, but I needed a host for these early pieces of furniture, and this was a good one. So Luxnick began to manufacture the Beryl, the original Wz.96, and then a short time later, the mini Beryl, Wz.96, which was the compact version based on the Onyx with the similar upgrades for the Polish military. But then around 2000, as happened a lot with Kalmbach factories, it was essentially downsized and shut down. Remember, Factory 11 was a large communist factory. Between 2000 and 2002, many of the assets were sold off to other private companies or simply retired, like the old AKM production line. All that was scrapped. And FB-Radom, the modern company we know, would open, and the Beryl line and a few others would be transferred to it. Now this wasn't a literal move, it was in the same building, so basically they just scaled back the factory, and a new private FB-Radom firm with ties to the government would open up producing the Beryl for the military. So at this point they don't really have any other AK production capability, just the Beryl series. But since this was the current military gun, that was okay. FB would also purchase all new equipment, modern CNC tooling, techniques, really becoming a very, very modernized factory, kind of sloughing off a lot of the old Kalmbach. After 9/11 and the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, Poland, who had allied with the West firmly by this point, would send units over to both Afghanistan and Iraq, and the original Beryls would start to see actual combat. Now, there was a minor update at this point, the Wz.96A, which was just a minor cosmetic upgrade. They would go to the new fire mode selector, as you see on this critter here. Instead of having the single arm of the Tantal, it now has 2 arms. And they would update the dust cover with a top cover, I should say, with a little dimple here to keep it from over rotating. That was a major update of the A. There were a few others, but that was the big one. They also started to issue more and more optics. And this is about when this style of optic came in. Instead of having the proprietary original Type A that arched over the dust cover, locking in front and back, they went to a short style that was originally Weaver compatible, later Picatinny compatible, that locked on just to the front. What it does, it has 2 screws, one on each side here, that lock in to the little holes in the sight, and then it has dimples that lock in to the grooves, and then there actually are small screws that keep these screws from twisting out. And this would be really the first NATO compatible, kind of Western optic compatible version of the rail system, and also issued in large numbers. The issue was, one, this isn't a secure mounting system, although it doesn't require you to remove the rail to disassemble the gun, but as you see, it sits very high. This was a problem because the Polish military had started purchasing EOTechs 5.52s mostly, which set really high. So this was quickly determined maybe not to be the best ergonomics. I don't know, seems fine to me. They also noticed some other issues. This folding stock, while solid and using the standard trunnion, is very, very short. I think they were trying to replicate the Warsaw length, but because of changing times and ergonomics, maybe wasn't the best. Also, the standard handguard, while actually very ergonomic, by 2003-2004, rails were becoming more and more common and used in combat for different devices. And likewise, the original black mags are starting to seem a little dated, as they were 15-year-old technology. And there were some other ergonomic things that they figured they could improve. We'll stop there. Did it stop? Alright, so lots of changes would be introduced between 2000 and really 2009 as these saw continual more combat. As I said, with the A, we went to the new Selector. We also got rid of this automatic latch, the manual latch, going to an automatic latch for launching rifle grenades. I do not have one of those yet. One day I hope to grab one. So we did go to that. Actually, most soldiers kind of find the that a pain in the neck, but so it is. Next, we would start to introduce more ergonomic, larger controls. For example, we have this large mag release, kind of a spoon shape. See? Get that out anyway. We also added this shelf to the safety. And we enlarged the ejection port a little bit. We lengthened it because 5.56 is by 45, whereas the original X39 is, well, by X39. All of these changes would be integrated in the 2003-2004 time period. And then FB-Radom, newly restructured, would introduce a new prototype known as the Wz.2004. This would feature rails, a stock that could fold and collapse, even a folding front sight, and a new rail system called the POP-C3, or Generation 3. The original POP-C1 was the proprietary that stretched across the receiver. Then the POP-C2 was the Weaver, the short one. In fact, this is a POP-C2 on this gun here, Weaver compatible. And the Polish military basically didn't want most of what was on the Wz-2004. Around 2005, the Wz.96B was introduced. And it basically just carried over a few upgrades. It would have the POP-C3 rail system, which was very similar to the one on this. It was a return to the long system, front and back, but it was Weaver compatible, and it would still block the front sight, the sights, and it was made of steel, so it was a little heavy, but it was a definite improvement over this. It set the sight much lower and was more sturdy and durable. They would also introduce the first railed handguard, which is basically, if you notice, just the standard handguard that they shaved the sides down on and bolted on polymer rail sections, and then they took a pistol grip, the standard grip, and modified it and bolted it to the bottom. And, you know, using pretty much the same parts that were on hand. That would be on the B. They would also go to a collapsing adjustable stock patterned after the M4, but they would not have the folding mechanism, and they would not use the folding front sight. They kept the fixed side. So that would be the B. It was really the first to have rails, the first to have an adjustable stock, and it had pretty much all of the ergonomic upgrades you see on the current guns. Around the same time, FB would start to introduce civilian semi-auto legal versions of the Beryl, mostly targeted at competition shooting, and continue to expand the line. Between about 2006 and 2008, they would show off at different trade shows upgraded versions. They would kind of play around with handguards. They would use an early style quad rail, but it was pretty heavy. They would try using some commercial rail systems, showing them off with different thises and that's and everything else. Basically just trying to drum up interest and modernize the gun. They would also start to introduce different variations. They wouldn't just be the mini Beryl with a 9-inch barrel and the standard Beryl with a 18. They would also show a Beryl Commando, which had a 16 barrel, which is pretty much this one here. And they would expand the chamberings, offering the Beryl M762, which was a 7.6239 version, which is very close to what this one is here actually. In fact, the barrel is a M762 barrel as far as I know. There was also talk about doing a M545, but this really never went. It was an option that no one ever took. So basically they were just trying to expand the line, and they continued to sell to the Polish military, of course. In 2008, this version here was essentially shown off, and then in 2009 it was officially adopted as the Wz.96C. What we've done, our barrel is pretty well the same. We've gone to a new pattern of lighter weight quad rail made of metal. We have a quick detachable, Picatinny compatible. By the way, these quad rails are now fully Picatinny. Foregrip, see this little screw here? Short little stubby foregrip. We've introduced the POPC Generation 4 rail system, which is now fully Picatinny compatible, not just Weaver. They would do a short version like this for the mini Beryl that was also PIC compatible. More importantly, they would add lightning cuts and other ways to save on weight, and they would do kind of a channel underneath so you can use your iron sights. Not as good as Co-Witness maybe, but it's something, right? They would also go away from more of the M4's type stock to kind of a proprietary stock. It has a 4-position kind of squared tube, fits in the standard rear trunnion, still uses the 2 screws plus the reinforcing plate. By the way, we have 3 rivets in the rear, unlike on the Tantal. The 3rd one was added to reinforce it for launching grenades. Like I said, they had a thing. Also, they made this nice large boot on the butt plate for both shooting comfort and especially grenade launching comfort. They would introduce a new pattern of sling. They would also make the front loop ambidextrous. Let's see, it's on this side here. And there would be a new ambidextrous ergonomic pistol grip. Much larger finger grooves, yeah. Finally, they would go to new patterns of mag. They would get away from the black. First, they would try to go to a basically a clear, smoke clear, 30 round. But they didn't quite have the polymer mix right. These had some spider web cracking issues. Arsenal had the same problems around the same time with their translucent smoke mags. So they would go to the now quite ubiquitous and familiar translucent green mags, which are much stronger. Now, interestingly, these green mags are not metal reinforced at the feed lips or tabs, but because the polymer mix is right, they hold up just jim dandy. So that was the Wz.96C, and this became and still is the standard in the Polish military. By 2011, they had about 45,000 Beryls in service, and they were still ordering new ones. By 15, they had about 65,000. The following year, 2016, they would order even more, and they would also upgrade older Wz.96s, the A's, the B's, to the new C pattern. And actually, as of 2018, there's still an ongoing contract with FB to both deliver new rifles and upgrade older existing rifles to the new pattern. This contract is scheduled to be complete next year, 2019, at which time the Polish military will have about 100,000 of these in service. So compare that to the 25,000 Tantals they picked up. Also, by this time, all the AKMs and AKMSs are officially out of service. There are a few left pulled in reserve. It's interesting, the older AKMs and stuff from the 60s and 70s, they've already sold off as surplus, many of them coming over here. But ones made in the 80s and 90s are still kept in reserve, basically the ones in the best condition. But they're not really ever expected to be called upon because Poland has plenty of the Beryl. In addition, of course, they continue to do semi-auto versions for the European market, and like this here, the Archer, there were about 700 imported many years ago by IO. And there is talk when FB is done with their current military contract obligations, they might try to send some more either Archer rifles over, or maybe, what I'd like to see, mini Archer, mini Beryl pistols, which is honestly easier to import. So that is a rundown as of late 2018. This is still the standard. And what makes it so great, this was designed from the ground up to be a 223, a 5.56 gun. It's not a retrofitted gun as we see with other AKs in that chambering. And it does very well. It was designed to easily mount optics, and this POP-C4 rail, the POP4 rail system, is a great combination of durability, simplicity, and weight. The quad rail is fine. It's a little tall, but it's actually quite thin. We get very good accuracy out of this barrel with the 18 inches. We have the pinned on muzzle brake. Hammer forged chrome lined, of course. This has a 1 in 9 twist to stabilize a wide range of bullet weights from 55 grain all the way up to about 62, maybe even 70. It will still take the clip-on bipod, and it takes pretty much any handguards intended for the Tantal or Beryl. Like I said, the rear trunnion is standard, so you can put whatever stock you want. The only caveat, because of this scope mount in the rear here, you might have to kind of shave the top of your stock down a bit, which is not difficult to do. Really, the biggest holdup for these for years were the magazines. It does take its own mags, of course. There have been talk of AR-15 magwell adapters, but to the point, nothing has materialized. But the good news is, last year, Arms of America started working with FB to start importing parts and maybe later even weapons. And so now brand new factory mags are available at a reasonable price of around $35 for brand new. So maybe not cheap enough you can afford to buy a dozen, but cheap enough you can afford to buy 2 or 3 if you have an Archer. These will also work in guns like the Wbp 223, the Sega 223, and the Arsenal SLR 106, although in the Arsenal they do fit a little loose. So yeah, that's why this gun is really one of my favorites. It's unique, it's Polish, it's extremely reliable. Accuracy is very good with these. They're very well made, very smooth guns, and their history is often overlooked. I think this is about as modern as we're going to get an AK. If you make any more changes, is it really an AK? That's kind of my thought. It might use the AK operating system or trigger group, but you know, so what? Lots of things use different systems. The handguard is already retained differently. The barrel profile is quite different. We have the rail system, very unique furniture. We have 3-round burst on the military guns. So yeah. Well, we didn't have much going on today, and I just felt like talking about one of my favorites. I felt like it didn't get its day because of the top favorite AK video, so I wanted to revisit it. These are quite collectible right now because they have not been imported in a number of years, but hopefully we might see some new FB firearms in 2019. Fingers crossed. Even if we don't, the Wbp isn't at all a bad substitute. Like I said, they are often working with FB-Radom. They use some FB-Radom parts, including the barrel, which is off the Beryl M762, which by the way has been adopted by the Army of Nigeria, so it has seen some military use. Hey, Africa is a pretty tough proving ground, so if it holds up in Africa, that says a lot. So we do have these, which is nice. Again, they still have a lot of older AKM features, of course, but like I said, I needed something to put the older Beryl furniture on, and right now another Archer is just way too expensive. Should have picked up 2 when they were under $1,000, huh? But on the other hand, it's kind of nice to have variation, and I really like the fit and finish on this, but we have a video on it, so it's kind of a lazy Friday. Thought we would talk about this. We have plenty of older videos. We do talk about the whole Radom-USA thing and IO and all that stuff. I don't want to get into it today. But if you're interested, you can check out those vids. This is a modern pouch, by the way. Doesn't have the pocket for the bipod. But it still holds 4 mags. Cleaning kit. Oh, one thing I didn't mention. The cleaning rod. This does not have a cleaning rod under the barrel. This is mostly because of the rail system. There's not room for it. So what Poland does, they have a sectional 2-piece rod that fits in the mag pouch. It's very much like the Tantal rod you saw, just 2 pieces, still quite thin, and kind of interesting. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Maybe learned a little something. I mostly just wanted to show off the stock. RTG had these a while back in nice shape. The Beryl folders have become kind of hard to get. In this, we have the Wbp 762 mag, which is basically the same material, same translucent stuff as the FB-223, so pretty neat. This rifle will of course accept the more modern POP 3 and 4 rail system. I just put the Generation 2 on it just for the vid to show it off. Why not? It's kind of unique, kind of goofily tall. Well, if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. As always, we do appreciate you tuning in. This is Misha, and we'll catch you next time.